Alright, so we have our USIT site pusher here, and just to go over what is really going on is you have your site pusher block right here, right? And that's kind of the standard one in there already. We do have a Kimber specific tool. How this is Kimber specific is kind of beyond me, but just looking at it by the eye test, it kind of has that Novak looking cut to it. So there's like that little high cut here, it drops down onto this level. These two levels right here are the same, and you have like a real low where it hits the base of the dovetail itself. So I would have to imagine that's why this is the Kimber specific one, because it works with those lower Novak cut dovetails out there, especially the rear sights. But this one is very much nothing special about it. It's got like a flat side on either side, and on the inside is like that little 45-degree cut right there, which you can use if you get good with it. But in terms of how this works, you got your block right here, which holds the slide in place, and that's just a little screw on the outside that moves it in or out. So what I usually do is just move this out of the way, open this up so you can put your slide in, and then you have your support block here, and it has 8 different positions. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you can see the holes on the side that goes in here, and this sets the height of where that slide is, right? So 1, if we use that, is the highest. So it's got, if we do it this way, the holes are on the very bottom on this side, meaning the support block is higher, hold your slide higher. Whereas the exact opposite, 8, holes are real hot, and that means your support block is really low. But honestly, the ones I use most are 1, 2, and 3, just on the slides I've used. So, for example, we got a Glock slide here. Put it in, that's generally the right height for where I use it. I keep that rear sight dovetail area generally like right in the middle of that pusher. And then you just close your support block. It's locked in there, right? And then when you're ready and you got your sight set up, I usually start it as much as I can. And if it's not far enough, when this is all the way to the left, I will set it up so that I have the sight in there, and then I just kind of like feed it in there so the sight is in between these two. Let's call them legs, and then you would push it as much as you can there. You go all the way and do it, or start it a little, bring it back out, undo it, right? Sight's still in there, put it back in, and now it's far enough in where you can put it in there so when you start it, there's a gap between this and the sight, and then you can go from there and feed it. If you like to use that flat edge better than the inside, where it has a little bit of an angle. So that's it. You really don't want to have to work too hard to work this screw right here. If it's too much, if you feel like it's too, like you're cranking on it too hard, you might just have to take out the sight and file it down just a tiny bit, you know, a little bit at a time. Kind of get a feel for when you're pushing too hard, because you can break sights if you're up too high on them. I've seen people do that a lot with like higher sights in general, where if you're only pressing on that top half, you essentially crank over the sight and break it. And usually you break it from one of these legs on the dovetail or the connection point between the dovetail and the post. So moving on, Glock is by far the easiest sights to install, just because of the flat sides of the side of the slide itself. You get into some slides like this SIG's not a perfect example of it, but you can see how it does get a little polygonal up top. It's only flat for like 2/3 of the slide, whereas with this you really only have flat slides on the support block and the holder block, right? So sometimes when you are pushing a sight, and if it's not perfectly straight, and when you start pushing and applying pressure, that sight, or excuse me, that slide will almost tip over at like a 5-degree angle, which is not great for pushing sights, which is definitely a one of the downsides of the USIT. There's not much you can really do to change how these slides in general are being held. There's only so much that's happening right there. So completely 90-degree angle right here, and on here you have this little cutout, which, to be honest, I do not know exactly what that is for. Other than that, it's essentially resting on this flat side right here, right? So if you do have a slide that is angled up, yeah, you're gonna have those problems where it tips over like this to the side, and then you're really pressing across this front sight when it really should be pressing completely across it for, you know, easier pushing. You don't really want to fight not only the pressure of the friction fit of the sight, but now you're fighting against all different surfaces because it's at an angle and you're not really pressing it out straight as it should be. So one downside of the USIT. Outside of that, you might have some issues with slides that have like really long, you know, bushing areas where you might have to press out the support block just a little bit to actually get it centered. I've had that a few times with some slides, but the majority of them, as long as that support block's all the way in, you're fine. Outside of that, there's not much to this thing. You just have to make sure you got the right height, eyeball it. So like for this one, Colt Commander slide, it's like real high, so I'm gonna drop it down to probably 3 or 4 if I had to guess. Because when you're looking across this way, you want to make sure that as this sight pusher is going completely across it, you aren't scratching the top half of the slide, which is pretty important, especially when you're pushing off sight and you have to go all the way across the slide to get a sight off. You just want to be very careful about how close you are to that slide, where this one is very close. I would probably go to a 5. So outside of that, for like fine-tuning adjustments, like let's say you're in between a number, I would put, you know, like a business card width on top of the support block in between the slide, and that's enough to really cover the distance between the two settings for height on the support block. All right, if you guys have any other questions, let me know.